TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Seattle's skyline shimmered against the fading amber of late afternoon as Vivian Hart stepped off the light rail at University Street Station. The city was alive with motion, pedestrians weaving between sidewalk cafes, street musicians filling Pine Street with soulful sax riffs, and the ferries crossing Elliott Bay like slow-moving beacons of light. From her perch inside the glass and steel monolith known as Skyline Tower, Vivian's apartment commanded a panoramic view. To the west, the Olympic Mountains stood like silent sentinels. To the east, downtown's cluster of high-rises sparkled as if dusted in starlight. At 30 years old, Vivian carried herself with a blend of quiet confidence and restless energy. With her dark hair cropped into a sharp bob and tailored charcoal blazer, she navigated the revolving door of her building's lobby as if on instinct. A rising star at Crestline Bank, she'd carved a reputation for herself with late-night diligence and an uncanny talent for reading balance sheets like old friends.
tonight, though,
Her usually steady heartbeat thrummed with a different rhythm, a mix of anticipation and dread, because waiting upstairs was her in-laws' dinner invitation. On the 35th floor, the penthouse suite belonged to Beatrice Sterling, matriarch of the Bennett clan. The stainless steel appliances gleamed in the open-concept kitchen. A simmering pot of coke oven filled the air with deep, wine-laced warmth, and the dining table, laid with ivory china and crystal goblets, sat against a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows. Viv had first visited this place 2 years ago to celebrate her marriage to Donovan Bennett, the dynamic 32-year-old civil engineer whose firm, Pacific Crest Engineering, was reshaping Seattle's waterfront. Back then, the evening had been electric with toasts and laughter. Tonight, she braced for something far less celebratory. Donovan greeted her in the entryway, his easy smile faltering for only a fraction of a second when he saw how tense she looked. His sandy hair fell carelessly across his forehead, and his broad shoulders filled out a navy sport coat. "You okay?" he asked, guiding her toward the dining room. Vivian managed a small nod. "I'll be fine," she lied. She'd learned early that Beatrice was not the sort to accept half-truths, particularly when it came to grandchildren. At 57, the Sterling Bennett legacy mattered to her as much as property deeds and philanthropy. And tonight, in the silent world behind those panoramic windows, that legacy felt as fragile as spun glass. Across the polished oak table sat Giselle Bennett, Donovan's younger sister, at 28 already a mother of 2 boisterous boys. Giselle bounced lightly in her chair, her hair a glossy wave of chestnut. She chatted brightly about toddler milestones, first steps, first words, unaware that each detail landed like a hammer blow to Viv's tightly held composure. "Mom says she's anxious to spoil new grandbabies," Giselle said, her eyes sparkling. "When are you two joining the club?" Her tone was casual, but her gaze unrelenting. Beatrice set down her crystal wine glass with symmetrical poise. "Vivian, dear, you and Donovan have been married 2 years. We're simply wondering if everything is progressing naturally." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. In that moment, Vivian saw in Beatrice's gaze not a grandmother's tenderness, but the steely expectation of a woman who viewed family like a boardroom merger, with deadlines, targets, and quarterly reports. Vivian forced herself to inhale slowly, recalling the friendships she'd nurtured over late-night brainstorming sessions or weekend hikes in Discovery Park. None of those easy confidences felt available now. She pressed her palms to the tabletop, steadying herself. "We're trying," she said in a voice so measured she barely recognized it. "Really, we are." Donovan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. In that simple touch, she felt the echo of their first date, shirtless volleyball on Alki Beach, sunburned laughter over fish tacos at Pike Place, a promise that in each other's company, they'd be enough. But tonight, enough felt like a distant concept, eclipsed by words unsaid and questions unasked. The meal proceeded in polite rhythm. Beet salad passed leftward, Coke au vin ladled in generous portions, mashed potatoes whipped to airy perfection. But the conversation never strayed far from the unspoken issue. Beneath the glow of modern chandeliers and the hum of city lights beyond, Viv tasted bitterness in every glass of burgundy, every bite of tender chicken, every sympathetic smile from her sister-in-law. When dessert arrived, a lacquered platter of lemon tarts dusted with powdered sugar, Viv's phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from her best friend Marin. "Don't let them break you. Remember Evergreen Clinic next week." She blinked, her throat tight. Marin Dawson, her university roommate who'd moved into reproductive medicine, had been the first to offer help and hope.
The reminder was a lifeline.
Rising from her seat, Vivian closed her eyes for a moment. The cityscape spread behind her, infinite and unjudging. When she opened them, she met Beatrice's expectant gaze and offered a steady smile. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "I'll call you tomorrow about Evergreen." In the hush that followed, the flicker of surprise in Beatrice's eyes was just enough to remind Vivian that while tonight had tested her resolve, tomorrow she would find a way forward, on her own terms, guided by quiet courage instead of pressure. And with that small but certain thought, she stepped away from the table, into the electric pulse of Seattle at night. The dinner had barely progressed past the first course when the underlying tension that always lurked beneath the sterling Bennett family's polished facade began to crystallize into sharp edges. As Vivian Hart settled back into her chair, she felt the familiar tightening across her chest, the silent warning that this evening would not be like any other. The low hum of Seattle's traffic far below mixed with the clink of cutlery and the soft buzz of conversation, but at Vivian's table, every word carried weight. Beatrice Sterling, seated at the head of the table, allowed a slow, assessing look to drift over Vivian and her husband, Donovan Bennett. The soft glow of the chandelier caught the crystal goblet in Beatrice's hand, making it sparkle like frozen wine. As if on cue, Giselle Bennett, Donovan's younger sister, set down her fork with a finality that seemed choreographed. Her wide eyes flicked to Beatrice, then back to Vivian as she said brightly, "Mom told me she's been checking in with the doctor every month since last spring. I guess when you're waiting for grandbabies, time seems to crawl." "Huh?" Vivian's pulse stuttered. She forced a smile, taking a sip of the burgundy Beatrice had selected to pair with the main course. "Yes," she said evenly. "We've seen our fertility specialist regularly. Everything seems normal, just hasn't happened yet." Donovan cleared his throat and placed a gentle hand over Vivian's. "We're both healthy," he said. "It's just a matter of timing." His voice was warm, protective, exactly the reassurance Vivian needed. But as his hand brushed hers, she felt the weight of Beatrice's gaze settle on her back, cold as a winter wind off Puget Sound. Beatrice's lips curved into a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Timing," she repeated. "It's funny how that works. You always hear, 'Oh, if only I could freeze time.' But when it comes to grandchildren, we desperately wish it would move faster." She leaned forward, the necklace at her throat shifting like a disciplined sentinel. "Vivian, dear, you and Donovan are both in your 30s now. The biological clock is not a metaphor, it's very much real." Vivian's heart pounded. She set her wine glass down and offered her mother-in-law a measured nod. "We understand," she said. "That's why we're exploring every option." The words tasted brittle on her tongue. Giselle perked up, as though she couldn't resist adding her own commentary. "Evergreen Fertility Clinic in the U District has a great success rate. My friend Laura went there. She and Jason were trying for years, and now she's expecting twins." Her eyes danced with self-satisfaction. "Maybe you should ask them for a recommendation. I can text your info." Vivian took another steadying breath. She had done her research, of course. She had read study after study, listened to medical podcasts, and taken notes from every conversation Marin Dawson, her college roommate and nurse practitioner, had patiently shared. But narrow smiles and unsolicited success stories only made her feel smaller.
Thank you, she said.
I'll look into it. And it's not just fertility, Beatrice said, folding her hands in front of her plate. There's also the social aspect. People notice when a family doesn't produce the next generation. It becomes a topic at charity galas, at school fundraisers, at every corner of our social circle. Wouldn't you agree, Donovan? Her gaze slipped to her son, whose expression tightened in that way Vivian recognized as internal conflict. Donovan met his mother's eyes and offered a polite nod. Yes, Mom. I've heard some of the whisper campaigns, too. It's unfortunate. He glanced at Vivian and attempted a reassuring smile that nonetheless betrayed his own discomfort. But, Viv, we're doing our best. Vivian felt tears stinging her eyes, frustration twisting in her gut. This was not how she had imagined the next chapter of their lives unfolding. She had envisioned warm weekends hosting friends for barbecues on the rooftop terrace, the laughter of tiny feet echoing through the hallways, and the comfort of a future that felt secure. Instead, here she was, under the glare of family scrutiny, feeling as though she were always at risk of failure. She lowered her head and took a small bite of the seared salmon that Donovan had recommended, a dish she loved when they first met. Its crisp skin and tender flesh had once felt like a promise of new beginnings. Now it felt like another wedge separating her from the laughter she craved. The room fell momentarily silent, the only sound the faint hum of the building's ventilation. Then Beatrice spoke again, softer this time but with the same steel underlying it. Vivian, I know you love Donovan. He's my son, and I want him to be happy, but he also needs to fulfill his role as the family's heir. It's not just about biology, it's about legacy. Please consider that. Legacy. The word felt like a blade. Vivian set her fork down, her decision crystallizing. She realized that whatever battles lay ahead, her path would not be determined by well-intentioned pressure or inherited expectations. It would be defined on her own terms. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Meeting Beatrice's unwavering stare, she allowed the tension to fill the room for a heartbeat longer. Then, with a voice steady but firm, she replied, I understand the importance of legacy. But Donovan and I will build ours in our own way, and in our own time. I appreciate your concern, truly. But we will make the decisions that are right for us. Beatrice's expression flickered, surprise, perhaps even a hint of grudging respect, before it settled back into placid composure. Donovan released Vivian's hand to reach for his mother's, offering a diplomatic bridge. Mom, let's focus on the great evening we've shared instead of future pressures. How about another glass of wine? Giselle raised her eyebrows but said nothing as Beatrice inclined her head and signaled the sommelier. The tension shifted, but it did not vanish. Vivian inhaled deeply, calming the storm within. She had spoken her truth and felt its power ripple through her. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, reminding her that she could reclaim her sense of timing and choice. And no matter how much family pressure she faced, she would not be shaken from her convictions. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but she would walk it with her head held high. The next morning, sunlight filtered through Vivian's bedroom curtains in soft golden shafts, only to be met by the stubborn knot of anxiety in her stomach. After last night's unwavering resolve, she rose early and brewed a pot of strong dark roast, its steam curling like a gentle promise. Donovan was already gone, clad in a crisp dress shirt and tie, off to oversee a tug-of-war between budget constraints and design revisions at a downtown site. Before the door clicked shut behind him, she simply said, I'm calling Evergreen today. By 8:30, she was in the waiting room of Evergreen Fertility Clinic, a sleek space with potted ferns and watercolor prints of Pacific Northwest beaches. Soft instrumental music played as she checked in, noting the mix of hopeful and tentative expressions on other women's faces. When her name was called, she followed a nurse down a hallway of pale gray walls. In the ultrasound suite, Dr. Elena Park greeted her with a warm smile that nearly displaced Vivian's nerves with a small sliver of relief. Good morning, Vivian, Dr. Park said, her voice calm and reassuring. I've reviewed your records. Everything looks encouraging. Hormone levels are within normal range. And uterine lining is excellent. How are you feeling about moving forward with the IVF cycle? Vivian sank into the exam chair, letting the reassurance wash over her. I'm ready, she whispered. After dinner last night, I realized I needed to take control. I want to do everything I can. Dr. Park nodded, tapping notes into her tablet. We'll start you on a day-by-day protocol. First, you'll begin a low-dose estrogen patch tonight to prepare the lining. In a few days, we'll add gonadotropin injections to stimulate the follicles. You'll visit us every other day for blood work and ultrasound monitoring. It's an involved process, but we'll walk through it step by step. As Dr. Park explained timings and doses, the medical jargon softened into adjectives of possibility: strong follicles, viable embryos, high implantation rates. After the consultation, the nurse taught Vivian how to self-administer the first injection: gentle pressure, a quick pinch, a small beep from the pen. At home that evening, she slipped the thin patch onto her hip, imagining it as a tiny beacon of hope rather than a reminder of her body's perceived failings. The following week became a rhythmic dance of appointments and protocols. On Monday morning, a nurse greeted her by name, measured her blood pressure, and drew vials of blood with professional ease. By Wednesday, an ultrasound tech guided Vivian's gaze to the monitor, where a cluster of dots, follicles, popped up like newly lit stars on the screen. Dr. Park pointed. 6 strong follicles, around 12 millimeters. We're right on track. Vivian exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That evening, after the injection, she sent Donovan a photo of her bruised thigh with a hopeful caption, "Progress report." His reply came almost instantly. "I'm so proud of you. You're incredible." Those 2 sentences glowed on her phone, a tether against isolation. At home, she leaned against the granite kitchen counter, replaying Marin's encouraging text, "One step closer each day." She took comfort in the ritual, chopping vegetables for a nourishing dinner, sipping ginger tea as the sun dipped below Rainier's silhouette, and practicing gentle stretches to ease the soreness in her abdomen.
By the second week,
the follicles had grown in number and strength. Dr. Park tapped her pen thoughtfully. "We're going to trigger in 24 hours with HCG. Then we'll schedule retrieval 36 hours later. It's a narrow window, so arrange for someone to drive you." Donovan eagerly volunteered, canceling a lunch meeting without complaint. On the day of retrieval, she lay on the procedure table in the operating suite, the dimmed lights and hushed conversation around her dissolving into a tunnel of calm. A slight cramp, a few minutes of whispers, and Dr. Park emerged with a small vial holding 10 retrieved eggs, more than she had dared hope for. "Excellent yield," the doctor said softly. "We'll fertilize and watch the embryos grow." The next 14 days were an exercise in patience and careful optimism. Every morning, Vivian took her progesterone supplement, picturing it as a guardian for the embryos soon to be transferred. Donovan texted her photos of the building site he was overseeing, construction cranes framing the sky, as if to remind her that growth, even in concrete and steel, took time and precise timing. On the morning of the transfer, 2 perfect embryos awaited her in a dedicated transfer room accented in soothing sea green.
Dr.
Park explained how the catheter would place them inches from the uterine lining. Vibrant hope thrummed through Vivian as she lay back, watching the procedure on a small monitor like a lifeline. The transfer took only moments, but afterward, as she rested in a recovery cubicle with a warm blanket, she felt the gravity of what had just happened. Her body now held the seeds of possibility. Back home, she clutched Donovan's hand as he squeezed her shoulder. "Everything will be okay," he murmured. She nodded, blinking away tears of relief. 2 weeks of cautious waiting stretched before her, days of quiet reflection, scales of self-care, and whispered conversations with her body before a mirror. Every morning she recited an affirmation. "I am ready to be a mother." By appointment day 15, she sat before the phlebotomist once more as blood was drawn to measure hormone levels. In the clinic's waiting area, her pulse raced until Dr. Park appeared with a soft smile. "You're pregnant," she announced in a voice threaded with genuine warmth. "The beta HCG is 1,250. We'll schedule an ultrasound to confirm in another week." Vivian felt her world tilt in the most beautiful way. Tears coursed down her cheeks, tears of gratitude, of relief, of dawning hope. She called Donovan first. "We did it," she sobbed. "We have a chance." His voice, thick with emotion, filled her with certainty. That evening, they stood on the rooftop terrace of their apartment tower, the city lights below and the stars above. Donovan wrapped his arms around her, and she nestled into his chest, the news settling into every fiber of her being. Vivian closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, for the first time in a long time, that her dreams of motherhood were within reach. The city breathed around them, and in this moment of renewed possibility, Vivian felt the future opening up like the first delicate petals of a spring bloom. The early morning sun filtered gently through the pale green blinds of Vivian's bedroom, casting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of her apartment building coming to life, a distant elevator bell, the faint rumble of traffic, and the reassuring click of Donovan's key in the lock as he returned from another overnight site inspection. With a small smile, she pushed aside the covers and swung her feet onto the rug, preparing herself for the critical milestone ahead. Vivian had navigated the preparations with steadfast determination, the estrogen patches applied meticulously to her hip, the gonadotropin injections administered with steady hands, the blood draws and ultrasound appointments punctuating her calendar like milestones on a journey she hoped would end in motherhood. Today was the egg retrieval, the culmination of weeks spent charting hormone levels, tracking follicular growth, and leaning on Marin's steady reassurances. Today, she would know how many viable eggs her body had produced. Evergreen Fertility Clinic's procedure suite felt calm, almost serene, as she arrived. She changed into a hospital gown and lay on the adjustable table, warm blankets tucked around her. Dr. Elena Park entered with a gentle smile, gleaning reassurance from her patient's composed expression. The anesthesiologist gave Vivian a reassuring nod as the sedative began to work its slow magic, easing her into a twilight state between wakefulness and sleep. When Vivian drifted back to consciousness, the room was hushed, illuminated by soft overhead lights. Donovan sat by her side, his hand gripping hers with a mix of excitement and relief. In his other hand, he held a small vial filled with a pale, milky fluid, a precious container carrying the tangible promise of potential new life. Dr. Park leaned forward, her eyes warm. "We retrieved 12 mature eggs," she announced. "That's an excellent yield. We'll fertilize and monitor them over the next 5 days. I'll keep you updated as they develop." 12 felt like a triumph, more than Vivian had dared hope. Her heart swelled, and tears of gratitude shimmered in her eyes. Despite the discomfort and the emotional toll, this moment reaffirmed her belief in the process. She squeezed Donovan's hand, whispering, "Thank you for being here." The next few hours passed in a blur of rest and recovery. The nurse checked on her every 20 minutes, offering water and toast when her throat felt dry. Donovan stayed close, brushing back her hair and distracting her with stories from the site, a new concrete pour that exceeded safety standards, a team that rallied together under his leadership. His voice was steady, a reminder that life continued to flourish in concrete towers below even as she sought to create life in a different way. By late afternoon, the clinic's embryology lab had preliminary news. A secure video link from Dr. Park led Vivian to a private consultation room with Donovan. On the monitor, images of petri dishes displayed tiny cells dividing, 2 pronuclei in each, the earliest sign of successful fertilization. 8 of the 12 eggs had become viable embryos, and the embryologist's notes highlighted their strong cell division and symmetrical appearance. "We'll continue to watch these through day 5, Dr. Park explained, pointing to growth charts and time-lapse images. "If all goes well, at least 2 will reach the blastocyst stage, ideal for transfer." Vivian felt a surge of cautious optimism. 8 viable embryos represented potential, a future, she could almost touch. She steadied herself, exhaling slowly. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. "That's more than we hoped for." Over the next several days, Vivian adhered to a stringent routine of bed rest, progesterone suppositories, and gentle walks through her neighborhood's tree-lined streets. Each morning, she recorded her temperature, noting the subtle shifts that hinted at hormonal stability. Every afternoon, Donovan brought fresh soups and smoothies, his presence a comforting anchor in the waiting. They avoided crowded restaurants, opting instead for quiet takeout dinners on their balcony, where the twinkling city lights below offered a sense of calm continuity. On the clinic's Day 3 check-in, an embryologist reported that 6 of the embryos showed consistent division and were progressing smoothly. 2 days later, Dr. Park invited them for the crucial Day 5 update. In a softly lit consultation room, the embryologist smiled. "You have 4 blastocysts ready for transfer. They're graded highly for both inner cell mass quality and trophectoderm appearance. Excellent candidates." Vivian's hands covered her mouth in disbelief and joy. For blastocysts, enough for multiple transfer attempts, even a frozen embryo backup. Donovan's eyes glistened as he placed a hand over hers. "This is incredible," he whispered. "We've come so far."
Dr.
Park scheduled their transfer for the following morning. She reviewed the final steps, resting for 24 hours after the procedure, maintaining progesterone, and avoiding strenuous activity. She emphasized gentle optimism. "We'll perform a beta-HCG test 12 days post-transfer. Your chance of success is very good, given the quality and number of embryos." That night, back on their rooftop terrace, Vivian and Donovan sat in silence, letting the magnitude of the moment settle over them. The Pacific breeze was cool against their skin, and the city's heartbeat throbbed beneath. Vivian rested her head on Donovan's shoulder. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "this journey has already given me hope I never thought possible." He stroked her hair and kissed her temple. "Together, we'll see it through," he promised. Every step. As lights blinked on across the skyline, Vivian closed her eyes, imagining the 4 tiny blastocysts nestled within her. In that quiet moment, she felt a profound sense of partnership and possibility, an unspoken understanding that this chapter was far from over, but that they had already achieved something remarkable. The future awaited, fragile and gilded with hope, and Vivian was ready to meet it head-on. Vivian's heart was buoyant with hope as the early morning light spilled across their bedroom floor. She felt the gentle flutter of possibilities settle deep within her. Donovan slipped out for a site meeting before dawn, leaving her cocooned in the soft hum of the apartment. She replayed yesterday's news, 4 strong blastocysts, an IVF success rate that outshone every statistic she had studied. With each breath, she reminded herself to trust the process. Her phone buzzed at mid-morning. A message from Giselle. "Hey sis, heard you're doing great. Mom's in town today. She wants to see you." Beneath Giselle's upbeat tone lay an unspoken urgency. Vivian hesitated, unsure whether she was ready for more family pressures. She texted back, "Stop by later?" Then, clicking open her email, she scanned the latest update from Evergreen. Blastocyst development remains optimal, scheduling transfer next Wednesday. She exhaled, already picturing the snaking corridor of the clinic's embryology wing where she and Donovan would place 2 of those precious embryos. At midday, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. "Hello," she answered. "Ms. Hart? This is Samantha from Cascade Engineering. May I speak with Mr. Bennett?" Cold dread blossomed in Vivian's chest. "You've got the wrong number." "Samantha Reynolds, HR," the voice persisted. "It's about Donovan Bennett. Is he available?" Vivian's blood ran cold. "Is Donovan in trouble?" "Unfortunately." Samantha's tone softened. "I'm sorry to inform you that Donovan is no longer with the company. Effective immediately." Her grip tightened on the phone. "On what grounds?" "There were allegations of unprofessional conduct with a vendor representative. I can't share details without his written consent, but I wanted you to hear it directly." The line clicked dead. Vivian sank onto the kitchen stool, her mind racing. Unprofessional conduct? At Cascade? Donovan worked tirelessly. He'd never jeopardize his career. The words vendor representative flashed through her mind, and her stomach plunged. She dialed Donovan's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Her heart pounded. She texted, "What's happening?"
Call me.
No reply. She spent the afternoon spinning through possibilities, budget overruns, design flaws, site safety issues. None fit the sterile phrase Samantha had used. As dusk approached, she steeled herself and called Cascade's main line, insisting on speaking with HR. After navigating an impersonal automated menu, she was transferred back to Samantha. "It's the same issue," Samantha repeated. "I wish I could give you more information, but legal constraints." Vivian pressed on, refusing to relent. "Please, even a name? A department?" Samantha hesitated, then said quietly, "It involves Vanessa Lynn. She was the project manager on the Pine Street redevelopment. Evidence suggests inappropriate communications and financial discrepancies tied to him." Her breath caught. Vanessa Lynn. The name stung with betrayal. She flicked back to the clinic's email, glanced at the 4 blastocysts waiting for transfer, and felt the future slip beneath her. That evening, Donovan returned, exhausted but smiling. He leaned against the doorframe. "Hey, how was your day?" Vivian closed the door behind him, her chest tight. She forced calm. "I need to know what happened at Cascade." His smile wavered. "That was rough. HR said there were allegations. I don't know how to explain." "Allegations of what?" she pressed. He ran a hand through his hair. "They won't say. Legal says don't discuss. I'm meeting with my attorney tomorrow." Vivian's voice shook. "You're not even denying it." He took a step forward, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't want you to hear it like this." "Like what?"
Her words snapped.
"That you had an affair? With Vanessa Lynn? That you jeopardized everything we're working toward?" He exhaled, pain etched across his features. "Yes." Her world shattered in that moment. She backed away, tears brimming. "You lay your hands on me to comfort me. You tell me to rest after IVF. You tell me everything will be okay, and you lie to me?" He reached for her, voice pleading. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake. I was under stress, work, family pressure." She shook her head, her voice raw. "Family pressure? This is our future we're talking about. Our dream of a family. And you trade it for Vanessa Lynn." His shoulders slumped. "I'm so sorry." Vivian felt the weight of betrayal coalesce into numb disbelief. She stumbled out of the room, fleeing to the sanctuary of her makeshift balcony garden. The night air was sharp against her skin. She held onto her stomach, imagining those tiny blastocysts, hope in suspended animation, vulnerable to her turmoil. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, heart aching, recalling Donovan's hand brushing hers after retrieval, the way he whispered, "We did it." She had believed him. Now, that trust lay fractured. Early next morning, she called Dr. Park's office. Her voice was steady. "I need to postpone the transfer." "Of course," Dr. Park replied with gentle understanding. "Take the time you need." Vivian ended the call and drafted divorce papers late into the morning. Each paragraph was a heartbreak, each clause a reminder of shattered vows.
She signed,
her hand trembling, not for the legal binding but for the end of a partnership she had thought invincible. Days blurred. She attended the transfer appointment alone, stepping into the clinic with a hollow heart. The embryologist offered kind words as they prepared 2 embryos for transfer, but Vivian's eyes were empty. She lay on the table, catheter in position, and watched the 2 embryos slide into her womb on a flickering monitor. Hope mingled with pain, cherished life placed inside a body betrayed. When she returned home, she found Vanessa Lynn's messages still on Donovan's phone, declarations of love, promises of partnership, demands for secrecy. Vivian deleted them all and locked the phone away. Alone in her living room, she sank to the floor, her phone beside her beeping with unread messages, HR inquiries, appointment reminders, supportive texts from Marin. The combined weight of betrayal and tragedy pressed in. She wrapped her arms around her legs, closing her eyes against the tears that streamed silently. In that darkness, a quiet determination kindled. The IVF cycle had given her a resource she still held: the embryos, 14 days old and softly nestled within her. Though her marriage lay in ruins and her career trembled, those embryos represented a future she could still shape. The question remained whether she could summon the courage to nurture that life alone, but for now, that sliver of possibility glowed brighter than the ache in her heart. And so Vivian Hart, in that moment of deepest sorrow, vowed that her story would continue, one chapter at a time, guided by hope rather than betrayal. The path ahead would be solitary, but it would be hers to walk. When the final signature dried on the divorce decree, Vivian Hart felt a hollow echo in the silence of her downtown apartment. The courtroom clerk had called her name, and she had slid her pen across the page, severing not just a marriage, but a shared history she had once believed unbreakable. She left the building clutching the stamped papers like a fragile talisman, half relieved and half unmoored. Vivian spent that night in the apartment she and Donovan had chosen together. Surrounded by unpacked boxes of belongings she no longer recognized as her own. Each photograph, wedding day smiles beneath a cherry blossom tree. Their first Christmas by the fireplace, stung with loss. She paced between the kitchen and living room until the pale northern moonlight illuminated her phone screen, where a single message from Marin blinked: "You're not alone. I'll drive down and help you pack." By dawn, Marin arrived with 2 sturdy duffel bags and a confident grin that cut through Vivian's lingering despair. Together they sorted through clothes and books, artifacts of a life that Vivian was determined to leave behind. In the soft hum of the U-Haul rental bay, they loaded framed diplomas, her favorite coffee maker, and a set of terracotta pots she had never quite managed to fill with thriving plants. Marin nudged her gently. "You'll start fresh. A new city, a new pace." That afternoon, they drove south on I-5, leaving Seattle's steel towers behind as the road wound through fir forests and rolling farmland. Vivian gazed out at endless fields of wheat and orchards blooming in spring's first flush. Each mile south felt like a small liberation from her past. When they crossed into southern Oregon and reached Ashland, the town seemed to welcome her with an amber light that softened the edges of her grief. Her new home was a cottage 2 blocks from Lithia Park, its white picket fence and red front door radiant against a backdrop of flowering dogwoods. Inside, hardwood floors gleamed, and the high ceilings made the modest rooms feel airy. A small fireplace invited quiet evenings with a good book. The kitchen windows looked out over a courtyard scented with jasmine. It was enough for a beginning. Vivian spent her first morning unpacking boxes in the living room, her hands lingering on a framed photo of her late-stage blastocysts, a reminder of the life she was nurturing despite everything. She placed it gently on the mantel alongside a ceramic pitcher she had brought from Seattle. As she stepped back, light streaming from the bay window caught the photo and glittered across the floor, as if affirming her decision to continue. That afternoon, she walked down Main Street, where sidewalk cafes served locally roasted coffee and small art galleries showcased regional painters. At a bookstore called Lantern and Leaf, she lingered in the parenting section, tilting her head as she scanned titles on single motherhood and IVF success stories. The cashier, a young woman with bright green hair, smiled when Vivian left with 2 books tucked under her arm: The Solo Parent's Guide and Hope for Tomorrow, IVF Journeys. Over the next week, Vivian settled into a routine: morning yoga classes at the community center, quiet afternoons at Ashland Creek writing in her journal, evenings experimenting with new recipes in her cottage kitchen. She found a local support group for women pursuing IVF alone, gathering every Wednesday in a sunlit room above a thrift shop. There, she met Carmen, a high school teacher who shared tips on stress reduction, and Brianna, a nurse whose warmth made Vivian feel less like an outsider. They traded stories, fears, and small triumphs, like a rise in progesterone levels or a beautifully sown garden plot at home. Professionally, Vivian reached back out to Crestline Bank's regional office, inquiring about a transfer opportunity in Medford. Within days, she was offered a position as a client relations manager with a focus on small business financing. The role promised challenges she welcomed, rebuilding her career on her own terms and earning respect through competence rather than family connections. On her first day at the Medford branch, Vivian arrived early, adjusting her tailored blazer and greeting the receptionist with easy confidence. The manager, a deliberate woman named Helena Quinn, led her on a tour. From the vault's heavy doors to the conference room where local entrepreneurs pitched expansion plans. By lunchtime, Vivian was sitting with a team of loan officers, brainstorming strategies to support new organic farms in Jackson County. She felt a familiar spark of purpose, numbers, and community blended in a way that felt whole. That evening, she returned to her cottage and prepared a simple meal of grilled vegetables and brown rice. As she ate, she reviewed her journal's reflections. Today I felt capable. Today I chose me. She allowed herself a small smile, acknowledging the courage it took to press forward. On Saturday, she drove to Lithia Park, settling on a bench beside the creek. The water babbled over stones. Unhurried and persistent, she closed her eyes and felt the sun warm her face, reminding her that life's flow carried her onward. When she opened them, a group of children chased a frisbee on the meadow, their laughter bright as bells. Somewhere nearby, a couple strolled hand in hand, and an elderly man fed squirrels at the edge of the path. Vivian exhaled the last of her fears. She was no longer the woman tethered to family pressure or devastated by betrayal. She was a mother in waiting, a professional forging a new path, and a survivor of challenges that had tested her faith in herself. As the creek's melody blended with the hum of spring, she felt a profound sense of possibility. In the weeks that followed, Vivian's belly began to shift, the gentle curve of new life beneath her clothes. At her first prenatal visit local to Ashland, DR, Patel confirmed that her hormone levels remained robust and that the embryo transfer had taken. Tears blurred Vivian's vision as she held the ultrasound image, tiny flicker of a heartbeat, stark against the grainy gray background. Driving back to her cottage, the afternoon sun gilded the world in optimism. She parked and sat for a moment, pressing her palm to her abdomen where hope had nested. A soft breeze stirred the blossoms overhead, and in that hush, Vivian whispered, "We're okay." Her new chapter was unfolding, stitched together by her own decisions and guided by the steadfast hum of possibility. She stepped onto the path leading home, her life's compass pointing steadily forward, toward a future she would shape with courage, resilience, and unwavering hope. Vivian Hart never expected a trip to the Ashland Farmers Market to carry the weight of fate, but there she was on a mellow Saturday morning, her reusable tote brimming with heirloom tomatoes and fresh basil. The sun glinted off the Willamette Valley produce stalls, and the scent of freshly baked sourdough mingled with lavender from local artisans. It was a setting she had come to cherish, simple, unhurried. A world away from the clinical sterility of IVF clinics and the tense formality of courtrooms. She paused at a stall where the vendor, an elderly beekeeper, was explaining the difference between wildflower and clover honey. As she sampled a dollop of amber gold sweetness, a voice behind her said, "That one's my personal favorite." She turned to find Adrian Cole standing there, his warm brown eyes alight beneath a casual baseball cap. He looked almost the same, except for a touch of salt in his once raven hair and a brighter, more assured smile. Adrian. Vivian's breath caught. He had been her boyfriend in college, the one whose laughter had brightened their dimly lit dorm room on nights consumed by exams. She'd let him slip away when she left for graduate school, thinking ambition demanded sacrifice. And now, 8 years later, here he was, as real and unexpected as morning sunlight. "Viv," he replied, voice steady and warm. He held out his hand, which she took without hesitation. The familiar comfort in his touch stirred memories of starlit walks around Campus Quad and coffee-fueled conversations about architecture and dream cities. I wasn't expecting to see you here. I've been living in Ashland for a few months, she said, grappling for composure. I just moved after, well, a lot of changes. She gestured to her tote. Trying to settle in. Adrian nodded, understanding in his gaze. I saw your name in the paper, Crestline's new branch manager in Medford. Congratulations. He sounded genuinely pleased. I'm still in Portland, but I drive through every weekend for my own practice. Her heart skipped. He had become an architect with his own small firm specializing in restoring historic homes. That's amazing. They strolled through the market together, sampling farmstead cheeses and discussing the advantages of camelina oil. Each step felt like revisiting a chapter she'd closed abruptly years before. The ease of their conversation undid knotted threads of anxiety she hadn't realized she still carried. When they reached a stall selling fresh-pressed apple cider, Adrian offered to buy her a cup. The warm, tangy sweetness settled on her tongue, and she realized how parched she'd been for something more than clinical hope and solitary courage. Being with him felt like exhaling after holding her breath too long. They found a bench overlooking the small duck pond at the center of the market. Around them, families picnicked. Children pointed at koi in a decorative fountain, and buskers strummed acoustic guitars nearby. It was communal, unhurried, a perfect antidote to the whirlwind of her recent life. How have you been? Truly, Adrian asked, tipping his cup. I saw something about IVF? I'm so sorry you went through that. His expression mirrored genuine concern, not pity. Vivian's throat tightened. The betrayal, the sappy promise of new beginnings, the harsh loneliness, it all flickered before her eyes. But she had made peace with much of it. It was hard, she admitted, voice low. But I've decided to see it through. I'm pregnant now, actually early stages, but it's real. She watched his face light up in awe. I needed a fresh start. Ashland felt right. He reached across the bench, fingers brushing hers. Vivian, that's incredible news. You deserve every bit of joy. His smile warmed her like a hearth fire. I'm so happy for you. She met his gaze, seeing not only kindness, but respect for her resilience. Thank you, she said. That means more than you know. They talked until the market began to quiet, moving on to adjacent streets lined with boutiques and cafes. Adrian led her to Bella Rosa, a small patisserie he'd discovered the previous summer. They treated themselves to raspberry macarons and iced lavender lattes, lingering at a corner table beneath a canopy of wisteria in full bloom. Between bites, they shared life updates. Adrian spoke of his firm's growth, of challenges balancing creative vision with clients' budgets. He described the restoration of a 1920s craftsman bungalow on Grant Street and his excitement over unveiling it next month. Vivian found herself drawn in by his passion, the same spark that had first attracted her in college. When she spoke of her new role at Crestline and the supportive team she'd assembled in Medford, Adrian listened intently. He asked thoughtful questions about small business loans, about community impact, about how she found fulfillment in finance. She realized how little they'd really known each other's worlds back then, and how deeply they connected now. As the afternoon waned, they strolled down Oak Street toward the edge of Lithia Park. Cherry blossoms drifted like pale confetti, and the creek's gentle murmur accompanied their steps. Vivian felt a surge of hope, a sense that this encounter might be more than a nostalgic detour. At the park's edge, they paused on a wooden bridge overlooking the water. Below, late-emerging frogs chopped at the evening air, and fireflies winked along the cattails. Adrian turned to her, eyes earnest. Vivian, he hesitated, searching her face. I'm not here to cause trouble. Seeing you again after all this time feels like a gift. If you ever need anything, coffee, help with obstetric appointments, even just someone to talk to, I'm here. She smiled, her heart softening around the edges it had hardened. I'd like that, she said honestly. I'd like that very much. He slipped his hand into hers, a simple gesture that carried the lightness of possibility. Good, he replied. Because I've missed this, us. He nodded toward the park. The sky, the moment suspended between them. If you'll have me. Vivian closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of blossoms and fresh beginnings. She envisioned holding his hand through the changes ahead, the growth of her baby, the dirge of betrayal finally laid to rest, and the unfolding promise of support and friendship. When she opened her eyes, she saw his reflection dance across the water and felt the first true flutter of hope in her heart. Yes, she whispered. I'll have you. And with that, they stepped off the bridge together, forging a new chapter from the threads of a shared past, one woven with compassion, trust, and the gentle promise of tomorrow. The dawn light filtered through the bedroom window of Vivian Hart's Ashland cottage with a gentle warmth, no longer weighted by guilt or regret. She stretched, feeling the subtle curve of new life beneath her heart, and smiled to herself before climbing out of bed. Donovan Spector had been banished by both divorce and forgiveness, and in his place stood someone who had re-entered her life when she least expected it, Adrian Cole. Their reunion at the farmer's market had kindled a friendship that quickly deepened into trust and affection. Today, he would ask her a question she had never dared to imagine again. Adrian arrived promptly at 9, his car pulling up under the dogwood tree where pastel petals floated like confetti. He stepped out with a small bouquet of wildflowers, blue lupin, white yarrow, and a single purple iris, picked from a nearby meadow. When Vivian opened the door, she felt her breath catch in delight. He handed her the bouquet with a shy grin. Good morning, he said. I thought you might like these. They walked together toward Lithia Park, the path dappled in morning sun. Adrian had planned a picnic by the creek, where a plaid blanket awaited beneath an ancient oak. He had brought fresh croissants, strawberries, and tart lemon curd he'd made himself. The kindness woven into each detail took Vivian by surprise. It felt like a seamless extension of the warmth and steadiness she had come to cherish in him. As they settled on the blanket, Adrian poured 2 cups of artisanal coffee from a thermos. They sat shoulder to shoulder, listening to the gentle rush of the creek. I've been thinking about us, Adrian began, offering her a cup. About how quickly things have changed. His voice was earnest, and Vivian lifted her gaze to meet his. I never imagined, she said slowly, that in Ashland I'd find more than a second chance at life. She sipped her coffee, savoring both the flavor and the tender gravity in his eyes. He nodded, setting his cup aside. When I saw you at the market, I realized how much I missed this connection. We fit together in a way I didn't expect after all those years apart. His hand brushed hers, fingers intertwining. I know you've been through so much, and I want you to know I'm here for the long haul, however that looks. She felt a flutter in her chest, part anticipation, part wonder. I never thought I'd open my heart again, Vivian admitted. But with you, it feels safe. Adrian smiled, eyes shining. I promise to keep it that way. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound journal. I've been writing down memories, little things that remind me of why I fell for you in the first place. He opened to a page where, in neat script, he had listed 16 reasons I love you. He read them aloud. Your unwavering kindness. The way you champion your dreams. Your laughter, like sunshine through clouds. With each reason, Vivian felt layers of pain and doubt peel away, replaced by a warmth that bloomed within her. When he finished, she pressed a hand to her lips, tears glimmering in her eyes. Adrian, that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me. He stood then, offering his hand. Come with me. He led her along a winding garden path she'd never noticed, past a row of lavender and through a wooden arbor draped in jasmine. At the end stood a modest stone gazebo overlooking a lily pond. Candles flickered in lanterns hung from the beams, and rose petals formed a heart on the flagstones. Vivian's breath caught. She looked around, tears welling again. Adrian, this is perfect. He stepped forward, sliding a hand behind her back and pulling her gently to the center of the heart. Vivian, he began, voice steady though his heart pounded, From the moment I met you again, I felt my life align with something I thought I'd lost. You've shown me strength, grace, and hope. He reached into his pocket and produced a small, velvet ring box. Her eyes widened as he knelt on one knee. In this heart of petals and candlelight, my heart and yours, will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a delicate white gold band set with a single aquamarine, chosen to mirror the color of her eyes. Vivian's world stilled. The creek's murmur, the lantern's glow, the jasmine scent, all became a backdrop to the beating crescendo in her chest. She knelt beside him, her voice catching with joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Tears of happiness streamed down her cheeks as he slipped the ring onto her finger, its cool metal a perfect fit. He rose and wrapped her in a tender embrace, and she felt the promise of tomorrow settle around them like a gentle cloak. They stayed in the gazebo until dusk, sharing soft smiles and dreams of a life built together. Laughter mixing with firefly light. Later that evening, back at her cottage, Vivian placed the ring on her bedside table beside a small scrapbook she'd begun, ticket stubs from their market date, pressed flowers from Lithia Park, photos of her pregnant silhouette at 20 weeks. She added a new memento, the orchid blue velvet box lid, inscribed in Adrian's handwriting, for every tomorrow. As she drifted to sleep, the world outside seemed to hum with possibility. In the quiet night, she whispered into the dark, "We did it." And though the road ahead held the uncertainties of pregnancy and life's inevitable challenges, she felt anchored by the love that had blossomed again, stronger, deeper, and brighter than ever before. The crash of summer thunder shook the hospital's sliding glass doors just as Vivian Hart stepped into the vestibule of Rogue Valley Medical Center. Dark clouds rolled overhead, wind rattling her umbrella. She'd hesitated this morning, torn between her deep desire to marry Adrian Cole in a traditional ceremony and the stark reality that time was no longer on their side. His thyroid cancer, diagnosed only a month earlier, had progressed faster than his doctors dared hope, and his weakened condition meant traveling even to a nearby chapel was impossible. Yet here they were, ready to stand by each other's side in a hospital room lit by fluorescent panels rather than rose petals. Vivian passed the information desk without a glance, her focus on the elevator that took her to the oncology floor. As she arrived, the faint smell of antiseptic mingled with the floral arrangement of fresh lilies that nurses had placed at Adrian's bedside. He lay propped up on crisp white sheets, his once strong frame now gaunt, the bald patch on his head marked by the rigors of chemotherapy. Yet when he saw her silhouette in the doorway, his face brightened with a warmth that erased the sterile surroundings. "Viv," he said in a near whisper, voice rough with fatigue. He reached out a hand, and she took it, feeling the thin skin and tracing the familiar length of his fingers. "You came." "I wouldn't be anywhere else," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt beside him, smoothing back the hospital gown's collar, and dabbed a stray tear from his cheek.
His eyes,
so clear and hazel even now, brimmed with both joy and sorrow. They had chosen this day carefully, between his radiation sessions and before the next round of treatments. A handful of close friends and family would arrive, each wearing scrubs or simple attire, honoring the hospital's policy, but also showing solidarity. When Vivian emerged from the bathroom at the foot of his bed, she wore a pale blue wrap dress, soft as morning light, her hair loosely pinned and glinting with a single pearl hairpin gifted by Marin. She had opted for comfort over convention, knowing that today she would carry more than a bouquet, she would carry hope itself. Lucas, her former husband's brother and one of Adrian's dearest friends, stood by the door to welcome their small contingent. He ushered in Carmen from the IVF support group, now holding a bouquet of daisies, and Helena Quinn, Vivian's boss, clutching a simple corsage of white stephanotis. A quiet hush fell as they filed into the room, each offering a nod, a gentle smile, an unspoken prayer. Dr. Park, who had pioneered Vivian's IVF journey, stepped forward with a clipboard in hand. "If everyone is ready," she said softly, "let's begin." She stood near the foot of the bed, framing Vivian and Adrian like a guardian of the moment. The overhead fluorescent lights took on a strangely sacred glow. Vivian turned to Adrian, her pulse echoing in her ears. "Adrian Cole," she began, her voice a clear bell despite the clamor in her heart. "When I first saw you at the farmer's market, I never thought I'd find my way back to you. Today, I stand here because of your faith in us, in this future, even when the odds were against us. I promise to love you, to walk beside you through every challenge, to be your partner in laughter and in silence, in sickness and in health. And though our time may be shorter than we wished, I will cherish each sunrise, each breath, each moment shared." Tears flowed freely as she reached into her pocket and produced a slim, silver wedding band. It glinted like a promise. Placing it gently on Adrian's frail finger, she felt the two of them bridged across years of longing and recent pain. Adrian's turn came. He swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to the ring, then to her face, the face that had weathered storms of betrayal and hope and had emerged stronger. "Vivian Hart," he said, voice wavering but resolute, "you have shown me the true meaning of love. Unwavering, courageous, and pure. In your arms, I have known joy I never dared dream. I cannot promise you a lifetime, but I vow to give you all I have, to hold you close through darkness and through light, to cherish your spirit and your kindness. Today, you are my wife in every sense that matters." He reached for the wedding band she had placed on his finger and, with trembling fingers, slipped a matching band onto her own. The metal was cool against her skin, a counterpoint to the warmth flooding her chest. Dr. Park offered a tender smile. "By the authority vested in me by the state of Oregon and the spirit of love that transcends circumstances, I now pronounce you husband and wife." She raised her voice so that even the soft beeping of monitors around them seemed to pause in reverence. "You may kiss the bride." Adrian leaned forward, and Vivian rose on her toes, their lips meeting in a kiss as gentle as the flutter of a butterfly's wings. The room erupted, not in wild applause but in hushed sobs and heartfelt embraces. Lucas and Helena stood to the side, tears glistening. Carmen raised her cell phone, snapping a photo that would capture this tender rebellion. Afterward, they gathered for a small reception in the hospital's garden courtyard, where portable chairs had been arranged under the shade of an oak tree. The thunderstorm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clear and the earthy scent of rain-washed ground. Hospital staff brought trays of sparkling cider and petite cakes topped with sugar flowers. They ate and laughed with a fragile lightness, aware of the moment's bittersweet magic. Vivian leaned into Adrian's side, wrapping her arm around him as he leaned his head against hers. "You did perfect," she whispered. He managed a soft chuckle, despite the weakness in his lungs. "So did you." That night, back in his hospital room, they talked until the floor's night nurse dimmed the lights. Adrian recounted their vows, his voice a gentle echo in the dim. "I promise forever," he murmured, "no matter what time we have." Vivian kissed his forehead, her tears falling onto his pillow. "Forever," she echoed, though she understood the word now carried a different weight. It was not measured in years, but in moments. Moments of love, moments of courage, moments that would live on in her heart long after the final goodnight. As the clock ticked past midnight, rain tapped softly against the window pane. Vivian stretched out beside him, her arm across his chest, feeling the steady yet fragile rise and fall of his breath. She closed her eyes and clung to the memory of every touch, every promise spoken into fluorescent light. Tomorrow, the fight would continue, radiation treatments, tumor markers, the uncertainty of prognosis. But tonight, they had woven joy and love into the fabric of hardship, creating a tapestry brighter than any storm. And in the quiet sanctuary of that hospital room, as thunder rumbled a distant lullaby, Vivian allowed herself to believe that even amid adversity, love could bloom fiercely enough to light the darkest night. The first light of dawn painted the ashland sky in soft rose and pale gold as Vivian wrapped her cardigan around her shoulders and stepped into the nursery. Sunbeams filtered through the linen curtains, illuminating the mobile of cedar birds that danced above a wicker bassinet. Inside lay a tiny boy, swaddled in a pale blue blanket and breathing softly. Each exhalation a quiet testament to hope realized. She knelt beside him, brushing a tender kiss against his forehead. "Good morning, my little miracle," she whispered. The previous night still felt like a half-remembered dream. Labor had begun unexpectedly on a quiet Thursday evening. First a trickle of contractions, then a crescendo that sent Donovan bolting from his post at the construction site to the hospital in record time. Marin, her steadfast friend and midwife in all but name, had arrived at the cottage to watch over the older children's playgroup she'd helped start, then stayed at her side through every wave of pain and triumph. By 3 a.m, their son had entered the world with a single cry that echoed through the delivery suite like the toll of a new beginning. Now, as Vivian lifted him into her arms, she felt the weight of his perfect vulnerability, his every tiny finger a promise of life beyond heartbreak. She closed her eyes and allowed the tears she'd held back these past months to fall freely, tears of joy, relief, and the fierce love that gripped her heart. Around them, the nursery was a testament to the journey that had led here, framed ultrasound prints lined a shelf. The scrapbook of their wedding in the hospital room now lay open to a page strewn with rose petals, and a soft quilt, stitched by Carmen and the support group, covered the rocking chair. Donovan entered quietly, his face drawn but alight with emotion. He paused in the doorway, drinking in the sight of them together, Vivian and the son he had longed for. The culmination of hope and heartbreak woven into a single perfect being. He crossed the room and knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on the baby's back. "He's so beautiful," he said, voice thick. "He looks just like you." Vivian smiled, tears making her vision blur. "He has your eyes," she replied. "Strong and kind." She angled her head so that their son gazed up at Donovan, as though recognizing the voice he'd heard in the womb. In that instant, the tension of the past months, the betrayal, the divorce, Donovan's illness, the uncertainty of IVF, fell away beneath the tender wonder of new life. They sat together in the rocking chair, swaying slowly as dawn deepened into morning. Outside the window, the dogwood blossoms trembled in a soft breeze, petals drifting to the ground like confetti. The world beyond their little nursery carried on. Neighbors walked dogs, joggers wove along quiet streets, and the distant whistle of a freight train rumbled through the valley. None of it mattered now, for they occupied a space outside time, bound by love's quiet miracle. Around midday, family began to arrive in small waves. Marin brought a casserole still warm from her kitchen, its aroma of roasted vegetables and herbs filling the cottage with comfort. Carmen arrived with a gift, a knitted blanket patterned in moon phases, symbolizing cycles of growth and renewal. Lucas carried 3 big balloons in pastel shades, carefully navigating the hallway with a grin that betrayed his attempt at solemn celebration. Helena Quinn appeared with a bouquet of daisies and a hearty congratulations, her eyes bright with pride. Even Beatrice Sterling, Donovan's mother, made her way into the room, her silver hair glinting, a hesitant smile softening her usual reserve. She lingered at the door, then crossed the threshold to place her hand on Donovan's shoulder. "He's perfect," she said quietly, voice thick with emotion. They formed a gentle circle around the bassinet, each person touching the baby's tiny fingers, offering whispered blessings, words of love, acceptance, and hope. Vivian felt the warmth of shared joy wrap around her like a blanket, healing the wounds of the past and forging a future bright with possibility. As afternoon light waned, Donovan and Vivian settled on the porch swing, baby cradled in Vivian's arms. They watched the setting sun cast long shadows across the garden, where wildflowers nodded in soft pink and lavender hues. Donovan reached over to kiss Vivian's hand. "I'm sorry," he said, voice earnest, "for everything that went wrong." Vivian laid a finger beneath his chin, lifting his gaze. "We both suffered," she replied gently. "But look at what came from it. He's our gift." She pressed a kiss to his forehead before turning her attention back to their son. "We'll tell him everything in time, about the struggles, the IVF, the storms we weathered. But most of all, we'll tell him he was worth every step." Under the oak's dappled shade, they stayed, 3 hearts bound together in a quiet communion of hope fulfilled. Night fell gradually, and the first stars winked to life in the clear sky. Donovan retrieved a baby blanket from the wicker hamper and tucked it gently around their son's shoulders. The world felt vast and unfurling, yet contained within that single porch, it all came down to this: a family reborn through faith and perseverance. When it was time for bedtime, Vivian carried their son back inside, placing him in the bassinet beside the window so he could dream under the watchful glow of street lamps. She lingered by his side, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. As she leaned in to whisper goodnight, his hand curled around her fingertip in an instinctive grasp that filled her with an ache of love so deep it stretched to the edges of her soul. She left the nursery door open, allowing the soft glow of the hallway light to filter through. Inside the living room, Adrian's ring sat on the coffee table beside the small scrapbook of their life together. Wedding petals, ultrasound photos, and now hospital bracelets and birth announcements. Vivian ran her fingertips over the ring, remembering his vow in the gazebo, to love her against all odds. She smiled, knowing he had fulfilled that promise in every heartbeat of their son. That night, Donovan and Vivian lay side by side, her hand resting on his chest, both of them listening to the quiet rise and fall of each other's breath. The world outside was still, as though honoring the miracle they carried in their hearts. Vivian closed her eyes and whispered into the dim, "Thank you for this life." Donovan turned toward her and kissed her gently. His voice, soft and steady, replied, "Thank you for being my hope." And in the hush of their small cottage, under the silent watch of 1,000 stars, they drifted into sleep, secure in the knowledge that love endured, that new life triumphs over sorrow, and that happiness, true, steadfast happiness, was theirs at last. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.